We talked about yesterday the big story that the highly credible, as we were told by Republicans, confidential human source that started this entire saga, Republicans investigating Joe Biden, accusing him of being bribed, all of these different wild things, hearing after hearing, stunt after stunt, allegation after allegation. All of it started with this FD 1023 form. And yesterday, I discussed in depth the fact that the source that accused Biden of those things, him trying to benefit his son's business ventures and being bribed and the Victor Shokin stuff, this guy, Alexander Smirnov, was indicted for lying about it all along to the FBI, feeding the FBI false information because he wanted to hurt Joe Biden politically, allegedly. That's the guy, the highly credible source we've been hearing about for so long. All of this started because of he was lying. And he's now being charged for feeding false information to the FBI on this. And we knew this story was incorrect, as I talked about yesterday, because of our own investigation into the evidence, or really the Republicans' investigation not yielding anything. But now actually seeing this individual be prosecuted for his false information to the authorities is pretty stunning. So then today I woke up thinking, how will right-wingers respond? Because so much of their anti-Biden rhetoric has been centered around, among other things, this story about him being corrupt. Well, he's just not. That's just time and time again being reaffirmed by their investigations and by stuff like this. And so are they going to come out and say, we were wrong? We got misled by this Smirnov guy and we apologize. The highly credible witness that we were so pumped about and that we felt justified this entire witch hunt into President Biden, he misled us and we apologize. No, of course not. Instead, they have to think of ways to bend reality to fit the narrative. And the great thing about conspiracy theories, as you're going to see here with Don Jr., is there's almost always an answer, because the horrible, bad people that you portrayed in this conspiracy can always do every single thing to make the evidence look like it points to them not doing the things that they're being accused of. But really, that's just more proof that they're doing the things they're accused of. And here's Don Jr., son of the president, former President Donald Trump. And he is panicking, obviously, and thus spitting out gobbledygook about this story. And hear his excuse for why actually the highly credible witness being indicted for lying to the FBI is still proof of their conspiracy theory.
Thanks for joining, first and foremost, because you're doing such great things.
And he's talking to another right-wing pundit named John Solomon.
Out there, you've really put yourself out there, taking on just beyond the narrative. And there's some breaking news. You've been talking about it. David Weiss, the special counsel appointed by Joe Biden, just indicted the informant who claimed that Burisma bribed.
Who claimed?
The Bidens. What do you make of this indictment, and what can you tell us in the context of all of your other reporting? Because, I mean, this just seems like literally, deep state, retribution at this point. I remember a time where all informants, all people who are willing to come out there and say something about the president, especially as it related to potential corruption, were treated as heroes, and this seems very different.
Wow, that's some intellectual analysis from Donald Trump Jr. He remembers a time when all informants, all people, really picking up on the speaking style of his dad, always having to escalate, all people, were celebrated for saying anything, especially about potential corruption, about the president. Now, see, Don Jr., you're misremembering. People were celebrated for exposing actual corruption of presidents, of powerful people. No one's supposed to be celebrated when they do a political hit job so blatantly that a Trump-appointed prosecutor, David Weiss, thinks he has enough evidence to prosecute this individual, Alexander Smirnov, for his actions and for his lying to investigators. That's not something people get celebrated for, Don. They're supposed to be celebrated for providing correct information to the public or to authorities about corruption of a powerful person. But again, in conspiracy theories, you always have the powerful group or person that can make everything look like the conspiracy theory is ridiculous, but that just is proof of how powerful and manipulative they really are. So here, he's saying that, the Trump-appointed prosecutor indicting, and a grand jury too, approving an indictment of Alexander Smirnov for lying about this story all along. Fabricating it was the wording used in this indictment. That's just proof that the Biden DOJ is going after the person who was going to expose all of Joe Biden's corruption. Even though before this happened, Smirnov couldn't provide any evidence and the Republicans couldn't find any evidence to back up these claims. And that was the first red flag. No evidence but these huge claims against Biden. Very, very strange. And now there is evidence he was lying, manufacturing, fabricating this to hurt Biden politically in the 2020 election and beyond. But no, see, he had all the evidence. But the deep state, which is the wording Don Jr. actually chose to use just to make himself sound as conspiratorial as possible, they are making it look like there's no evidence, making it look like this guy is not just not credible, but a potential criminal in his obstruction and misleading of investigators, and making it look like Biden's not corrupt. Wow. That deep state is something else, huh? And it reminds me of watching right-wingers report on the indictment of Democratic Senator Bob Menendez. So the storyline has been this whole time, right? That the DOJ, the justice system more broadly, is doing everything it can to protect Democrats and to go after Republicans. And then a powerful Democrat is indicted for some really serious charges and some significant evidence being brought in this indictment. And I think prosecutors have a really strong case against Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, also for, but actually for bribery-related charges. And then I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to wake up tomorrow. Again, the little naive part of me says on one shoulder, you're going to wake up tomorrow and these right-wingers are going to go, wow, Biden's DOJ going after a powerful Democrat. Maybe we were wrong the whole time. But no, we were told by people like Charlie Kirk that actually this is just a way to throw Bob Menendez into the garbage disposal as a sacrifice so that right-wingers get misled and think the DOJ is not biased, but really they are against Trump and against Republicans, and they're still trying to protect Democrats, even though they're investigating the mayor of New York, who's a Democrat, and Bob Menendez, and Hunter Biden has now been indicted for the gun-related charge and the tax-related charges. And then the argument kept being, well, this is all just to make it look like they're not biased. And what I've said before is if they're doing all these things that you admit make it look like they're not biased, but that's just to make it seem that way when they are, maybe a simpler answer is they're just not biased against Republicans. Maybe they're just trying to apply the law equally, at least as it pertains to political persuasion. We've talked about how power can change the treatment of individuals for sure, but political persuasion doesn't seem to be doing it, at least in the way that Republicans portray it. There is a case to be made that Hunter Biden right now is being treated worse than somebody else would if they weren't so prominent and the son of President Joe Biden, given all of Republicans saying, this prosecutor's not going to do anything on Hunter Biden. And based on the charges that have been brought for the actions that are alleged, there are legal experts saying this is actually on the harder, the more aggressive end of similar cases, which is interesting. But regardless, definitely not the narrative that Republicans have been going with. The other thing I want to do in this segment is just remind you of how much we've heard from Republicans, from right-wing media about this FD 1023, about this highly credible, confidential human source. And I really want to know, are they going to come out and apologize to President Joe Biden? Here's Sean Hannity.
There are now real and growing concerns that your president, the president of our country, is compromised. After months of obfuscation from the FBI and the DOJ, that FD 1023 form that documented allegations of bribery from a trusted FBI confidential human source has now finally been released thanks to Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa. Now, its contents are devastating. We're going to break it all down for you with investigative reporter John Solomon.
And then here is James Comer, a few examples of him really excited about the catalyst for this entire investigation. And what is he going to say now? Even though I'm sort of lightheartedly saying maybe they'll come out and apologize to Biden. Obviously, that's not going to happen. They're probably going to lean into what Don Jr. did and say this is the deep state going after the still highly credible source, even though it's a Trump-appointed prosecutor who got an indictment approved by a grand jury of just regular citizens and who thinks he can get a conviction in a court of law to prove that this guy was lying.
FBI had an unclassified record that details an extortion and bribery scheme involving then Vice President Biden. We haven't gotten anything from the FBI and DOJ.
I guess.
Now remember, this 1023 that was released by Grassley last week, now we know about this Form 1023 that alleges bribery.
You have the actual crimes the Bidens have committed, which range from money laundering to bribery.
Now that evidence, that FBI form you keep hearing about, well, it's all BS, at least according to a new federal indictment today.
Yep, that's exactly it. I won't subject you to this for too much longer, but just a few more examples because it's easy to forget, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to make you forget that this is how much they base the entire investigation and the entire probe into Biden on. They're going to try to pretend that was just a little edge thing. We barely even cared about it. But we can't forget that. Again, this was the catalyst. This was the beginning of the entire investigation. And the justification, I think, in their minds, because it sounds official, highly credible, confidential human source, this FD 1023 form, FBI, it was the justification for them to go on television, say the Biden crime family over and over and over and over again until millions of Americans believed it, even though there's absolutely no justification for having that belief when it comes to President Joe Biden.
In this FD 1023 document, the human source clarified that Burisma's CEO, the man in charge of Burisma, said he has many text messages and recordings that show he was coerced to make such payment to ensure Victor Shokin was fired. Matter of fact, there were 17 of them. Mr. Garland, it's clear Joe Biden wanted Shokin fired so he would stop looking into Burisma, where Hunter was on the board. Would you agree? All right, let's let the American people decide. Play the clip. Play the clip.
Claims. The mainstream media has largely ignored the story or parroted the White House false claim. What does the FD 1023 form tell you? I'll tell you exactly what.
So you get the point. Lies. A bunch of lies. And I'll insert into this conversation again as I did yesterday. Meanwhile, Biden's getting things done. Republicans spending their time smearing him. That's what this is. As much as they have said Trump is the victim of a witch hunt, they are conducting a witch hunt against President Joe Biden. That's what this is. While they're spending taxpayer dollars, resources, time on this investigation, using hours of television time, accusing Biden of all these things, and more so just asserting as fact that Biden was guilty of all these things that he's just not guilty of. While they're doing that, that's their focus, that's their priority. What is Biden doing? Overseeing an economic recovery that has been stunning. That wasn't a given. We expected much worse. And now we're dominating on the world stage economically post-pandemic. Job growth, unbelievable. 14 million plus jobs created. Unemployment below 4% for longer than we've seen in 50 years. For 2 years straight, below 4%. Wage growth, adjusted for inflation, stronger than it was pre-pandemic, stronger than it was under Donald Trump. Some of the most historic policies we've seen in decades. The most successful president in modern American history. That's what he's been focused on. Managing world crises. That's what Joe Biden's been focused on, and Democrats. Actually doing the things they're supposed to be doing, while Republicans spend all of their time and all the power they've been given by the American people just trying to hurt their political opposition. Hopefully they're punished politically for that in this next election. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. You can become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership.